Our main contact person is Erla Ellensdottir. She's unfortunately out of the country at the moment. But today, Mr. Professor Mora will talk to us about his passion, which is teaching. And the title is already up here, Introduction to Linguistics Using Active Learning Methodologies and Experience from the University of Sevilla. Professor Mora, the floor is yours.
Okay,
Good to see you. Welcome to Iceland.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here, and especially after such prolific collaboration that we have kept all these years, and especially after I spent here more than 1 year in Iceland, teaching, and mostly teaching, and also doing some research. And I have to confess that there are only two things that I don't like from Iceland. I love everything. I love the people, I love skills, I miss the swimming pools, but there are only two things. The only thing that I miss from Spain while I was here is that no matter what weather you had, even when it was shining, even in the summer, the sun never warmed your skin. And that's strange. That was the only thing I couldn't get used to here in Iceland. That's the only thing I missed in Spain. Now after a torrid summer with 40 degrees temperature, I don't miss the heat of the sun anymore. And the other thing that I hated from Iceland, and it's a thing that when I left, there were great hopes that it would not continue, because there was a few months after I left, a new mayor of Reykjavik was elected, John Gnar, and I think he made two promises in his electoral campaign. Well, three in fact, I think. One was whenever there were a new polar bear coming into Iceland, it wouldn't be shot and killed, like the last one this July. The second one, that is, he would raise tariffs to certain honest people, no, whenever they wanted to come to Reykjavik, but he never. But the third promise was that he would not fulfill any of the promises, so it would be so he didn't fulfill this promise. But I want to bring you this image of the polar bear, which has been brought lots of criticism to Iceland. Well, in the same way in Spain we get lots of criticism for what do we do to the bulls and all these animals in all the. So we are not. We are also guilty of this type of behavior towards animals. Is that the main focus, the main topic of my lecture today has a lot to do with these white bears, because we in academia are in danger of becoming endangered and also having a similar situation like these white bears, because things are changing very fast in our societies. I suppose you are all aware of that. There is one famous sociologist, Sigmund Bauman, who has talked about the liquid society, and here you have the problem of the bears is liquidity. I mean, the environment is becoming a liquid, and so they have no place to where they can hunt, or even they can live. And so we don't feel certain anymore. Our society is full of uncertainties, it's full of insecurities. Now the big crisis that we lived here in Iceland, and after I went back to Spain, we also lived in Spain, and you in Iceland apparently are getting out of it thanks to tourism, but beware of bubbles, okay? Laxness warned you in his novels about the bubbles, cyclic bubbles in Iceland. But in academia, we are in a moment of crisis, okay? And I want to illustrate this with a video. It's a trailer of a movie that has not been released yet, but if you have been lucky enough and have gone to Venice to the film festival, maybe you could watch it there, because it had the premiere there. And it's a Hollywood movie, and the main protagonist is a linguist, a female linguist, even more strange, okay? And I want to show you the beginning first, and I'll try to stop. Let's see if I can hear.
Good morning. Today we are talking about Romance languages. Any news you want to share?
8 hours after landing, there's still no signs of first contact. The objects measure at least 1,500 feet tall.
Mama,
You cannot see what?
I don't know.
More objects like this have landed around the world.
I wanted to
There's
stop a
no
little
signs
bit.
of first contact. The objects measure at least 1,500 feet tall.
Mama,
Okay, I
it's
wanted to
good.
stop first.
Any news you want to share?
Okay. Oh, not here, the next.
8 hours.
Okay. Here, you see here a Romance language class taught by this linguist. This is very typical of our classes nowadays, no? Our students are there with their computers. I have to confess that the first time I saw that were from the students from Iceland you sent to Spain 2008 before the crisis, and they were sitting in my class with a computer, and it was very strange for me. But then nowadays, all our students are like that, no? Look how they are sparsely seated and how they are using their phones. And so if we keep on lecturing, we are in trouble of not getting the attention of the students. Just a second, because this is continuous just for a few more seconds. But now the other important point I want to raise with this video is that we have to prepare our students for unexpected situations, like the situation this woman, this linguist, is going to face.
After landing, there's still no signs of first contact. The objects measure at least 1,500 feet tall.
Mama, what's going to happen?
I don't know.
More objects like this have landed around the world.
Dr. Banks, I'm Colonel G.T. Weber. You're on the top of everyone's list when it comes to translations. I have something I need you to translate for me.
Is that?
Not everyone is able to process experiences like this. When's the last time you did something stressful? Does it now count?
We need answers as soon as possible. What do you want? Where are you from?
Okay, I don't know if you heard the two questions. You can turn on the lights now. She has to find out what do they want and where do they come from, okay? Those are questions that no linguists have faced before, because we've never, as long as we know, we faced any such situation. But we have to face it. In this new society, liquid societies, our students are going to face situations like this, and the real life is where they're going to have to answer questions. And the question I want to raise with you is, are we preparing our students for the prepare for the unexpected, no? for the things that they're going to face in their daily lives? Okay, since I don't want to do a classical lecture because I'm against classical lectures, and I want you to interrupt me at any moment, and I'm gonna pose to you at the beginning now a question also. It's a difficult question because it's about yourself, but since you are all academics and it's about learning, I suppose you can answer this question very easily. We don't have too much time because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but here you have a list of, well, if I manage to get to the next slide.
What happens now?
So I'm going to go here. The next slide is here. Okay, this is the question for you. How do you learn best? And I'm giving you different situations. If you are an academic, try to think this in the context of maybe a conference or something. When you're in a conference, do you learn the most by listening to a talk and understanding it, hopefully, if you understand the person who gives it, taking notes from that talk, or writing or creating for that conference, or applying the knowledge that you learned in that conference in a new situation, or reading the proceedings maybe of the conference, or teaching when you come back, teaching about the conference, or discussing with peers in the questions, and analyzing what's going on, reflecting, or evaluating. So try to list this from least effective or less useful or most useful for you. Okay, just 1 minute. Then if we had enough time, I would ask you to share the information and see if you agree. But since we don't have too much time, just think for a minute. How do you learn the most?
When you go to a conference, right?
If you are an academic, when you go to a conference, if you're a student in class, okay? Yeah, but that's a good point, because I'm going to give you now what experts usually say. But experts make too many generalizations, and it all depends, okay? And I don't usually believe what experts say, especially ignore what they say about 10%, 20%, because I don't know where they get those figures, we don't really know. But the basic idea, the gist of it, is that you would all agree that when you do simple things that like defining, listing, describing, explaining, you learn less than when you have to demonstrate something, apply something, do practical things with those things, okay? So this is more higher, or at least it helps you more to learn. And if you go here, if you have to analyze, design, create, evaluate, this is when it's most difficult. I mean, you would all agree, if you are all teachers, evaluation is the most difficult part of our job, okay? And in any task, to evaluate. And if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, you have seen this, here is the opposite way. Deciding the verbs, remembering, so recognizing and recalling facts. This is easy, I mean not so easy, but it's easy compared to understanding, okay? Many of our students are very good maybe recalling in exams, but sometimes they don't understand what they are recalling, and therefore they don't learn without understanding, no? And if we go further up, if you know how to apply the knowledge, then you are a third, if you know how to analyze the problem or the situation. And here Bloom's taxonomy is interesting. This evaluate, create, they were switched a few decades ago. Previously it was create, evaluate on top. Nowadays it's evaluate, create on top. But you would all agree, no? That when you are creating, when you are evaluating, you are learning more than when you are doing these more basic things, no? And you would all agree with me that in the traditional classroom, most of the things that we do is to have the students remember some understanding, and then in the exams, we usually, or in many occasions, most of the exams require us memorization, no? Not really doing other things, no? What I'm going to claim here is that we should concentrate in our teaching, in our classes, because our students have to do these other things out of class, usually. I'm going to defend that in our classes, even our introductory classes, because this is obvious when we are at the doctoral level, master's levels, we all do this all the time. But in the more basic classes, we tend to concentrate on this part of the taxonomy. So what I'm going to defend is that we have to create tasks, concentrating activities in class where the students are doing this top part, okay? And the reason I do this, I'm going to give you now some quotations that sort of inspire me. I'm sure you have seen this before. In many occasions, in many places, this is attributed to Benjamin Franklin, and in other places to Confucius, but apparently it's not from any of them. It's from a philosopher, Chinese philosopher in the school of Confucius, but it's not, it's Sun Tzu, okay? And he says, this is how they translate it in English: tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn, okay? But the literal Chinese, you have it here, is very similar to the taxonomy we just saw from Bloom, no? It's not hearing is not as good as hearing, hearing is not as good as seeing, seeing is not as good as mentally knowing is not as good as acting. The true learning continues up to the point that action comes forth. This basically means that you learn doing things, okay? And you would all agree with me, I hope, no? That he's right. Many 2,000 years ago, Sun Tzu got it right, that we learn with action. This has been repeated over and over by people like Dewey and many other scholars. Another quotation I want to point out, and this is also very inspiring to me. I asked last year, 2 years ago, my students to give their famous quotation. This student, first year student, gave this quotation. And this is from Plutarch: the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. No? What does it mean? And why is important this quotation? In the traditional way of looking at communication and at looking at learning, we imagine that the teacher has content and he has to pour that content into the mind of the student, which is empty. And that's not true at all, okay? And we all know that also. but sometimes we act it as if this pouring the content into the mind of the student is what we have to do. But no, we know that in communication doesn't work like that. When I talk, my message is going to be received differently by each of you, because it's going to be dependent on your experience, on your beliefs, on your ideas, and you are going to construct a totally different, or at least separate meanings from what I'm saying, okay? And so if communication works like that, teaching also should work like that, that when we talk to a general audience, each person is going to receive differently according to where the initial state. So what we should do as good teachers is try to find out the initial state of our students and build from that, okay? That's what I believe. Now two quotes by Dewey, John Dewey, my favorite probably of all people who have been devoted to education, American philosopher, pragmatist. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. How many times have you heard, oh I'm studying in order to be, or you spend 20 years schooling, and apparently that's to prepare you for life. But we usually forget that that's life for the students, okay? And as teachers, as educators, we are responsible of bringing life to a classroom. Remember that linguistics professor who was in her classroom? The life was being brought by the devices of the students, no? Because the classroom seemed like a dull, not interesting place. We have to make our classes like life, interesting for our students, okay? Unfortunately, nowadays, the new technologies let us do that in a simpler way, no? But now, probably this is the most important quotation of all. And I have it twice, now, and one of my students is going to say it, because if you agree with me in this, and well, you agree with Dewey, because it's a quote by Dewey, then you agree with me that we have to try not to give lectures, not to explain things, not to give content to our students, so we have to try to do other type of activities like the ones I'm going to propose here today, okay? So, Dewey says, no thought, no idea can possibly be conveyed as an idea from one person to another, okay? So, if I'm full of ideas, because we are professors, we know a lot, and I'm giving a lecture, the ideas that I'm giving in the lecture cannot go to the student. They are not a liquid that go in the mind of the student. The student, and this is what it says, has to build his or her own ideas, okay? When it is told, it is to the one to whom it is told, another given fact, not an idea. I can give you facts, but unless you internalize those facts and become your ideas, you have not really learned anything, okay? The communication may stimulate the other person to realize the question for himself, or herself, we do that nowadays, but we at that time wasn't worried about that, and to think out a like idea. Okay, when we motivate the person, and after our lecture, the person does these other things that we were talking about, then the person is gonna get the idea. But unless the person does this, okay, because we have another danger, or it may smother his intellectual interest and suppress his driving effort at thought, okay? With lecturing, maybe we are hindering the students, okay? But what he directly gets cannot be an idea, okay? So you agree with me in this? So when we communicate, the classic, well, the naive view of communication is that we communicate ideas, and then you have the idea. But that's not true. You have to build your own ideas, and it's a process that takes what he says, Dewey says last. Only by wrestling with the condition of the problem at first hand, by acting on the problem, okay, seeking and finding his own way out, does he think. Okay, you get ideas when you try those ideas in the real world. Okay, so again, learning by action, by experience. That's the basic idea of Dewey. And I agree with him, and that's why I do what I do. And that's why I also agree with a Nobel Prize, or, well, I have let's hear it in English, probably better pronounced that in my Andalusian accent. This is a student, American student.
John Dewey. No thought, no idea can possibly be conveyed as an idea from one person to another.
Okay? So, you agree with that, or you want to say something? You agree with this? Yes or no? Okay? Okay, if you agree with this, then maybe, let's see if I can take out and go to the next one. Okay. You would also agree with this Nobel laureate, Carl Wyman, professor at Stanford, who says explicitly that college lectures are about as effective as bloodletting. I suppose you know that for 2,000 years in medicine, the main way of curing or killing patients was through getting blood out. Why was it done for 2,000 years when people knew that it really didn't work? Well, because that's what everybody does, that's what being a doctor supposes, and that's why we lecture, okay? Because we think it's useful, but instead, it's more harmful than really beneficial, okay? And I think I agree with Wyman, okay? He's given up his research, his Nobel Prize research, and he's now devoted to education and to try to defend these ideas that call for active learning on the part of students and teachers, okay? Organizing the teaching process so that it requires action from the students, okay? So, now I'm going to talk to you about active learning in my linguistics first year class, okay, at the University of Sevilla. What type of techniques, methodologies, or models do I use? I use project and problem-based learning. I give my students projects and problems that they have to solve, and most of the time in class we are working on the projects and the problems, okay, and the solving. Also collaborative learning, that's very important, peer learning from peer to peer. There are also some scholars in America, Masur and others, who are defending this, that students learn more from their peers than from the teachers. So this is something that we have to be taking into account. Or Sugata Mitra, who wants to get rid of teachers at all, and let the students learn with the computer directly. Also, I'm using learning by doing and by teaching. I have my students teach to the other students, but I try to teach them to teach in a new way, not in the old way with lectures, okay? So when the presentations I ask my students to carry out in class, they have to be interactive, and the other students have to participate, so that the process of learning is doing. Also, use of new technologies, this is key, and it facilitates a lot our work, especially when we have large groups, and also has changed the game, has changed everything. Because before, I mean, you could justify, okay, students didn't have access to the knowledge or to the information, so it was good that there was a teacher who managed to provide them access to this knowledge. But now the information is in our devices, and the basic skills that the students have to learn is what to do with that information, how to find it, how to decide what is good information, but information, how to use it, exactly. So that's why we have to promote the higher order skills, no? And finally, what's called flipped learning and flipped classroom, which I talked a lot last year in the same at the University of Iceland. And this is more a model than, and this is curious because this is becoming very popular nowadays. And it's in fact what we have been doing in academia in these higher level classes and in master classes. No? You always give your students some readings, you expect your students to come to class with the readings, and you discuss. And we all know that that's the way you really make more profit. But now it's extending to all levels of education, and that's why I like the term, even though it's something that we have been doing for a long time. Although now I see this useful in a sense. Some people are still worried, oh no, I'm a teacher, I have to teach, I have to explain, I have to... Okay, with flipped learning, you can record yourself, put your videos in YouTube, ask the students to watch the videos, and come to class, and you have explained, and you have fulfilled your role. So as a transition to these new active methodologies, I see this flipped learning as a way to get there. It's good. Now, what do I do with my students? In particular, this is an introduction to linguistics class. It's 1 semester, 6 credits. Okay, so if it's 6 credits, it involves 150 to 175 hours of work on the part of the students. I try to control myself because I try to, but I try to measure what they should do in the number of hours they should devote to each of these activities. Okay, and so we have 6 whole class projects to collect examples. This is just using the devices they have, using the fact that they all, most of them are in Twitter or Facebook. We collect examples for six projects, 6 small projects. Well, this intro is the hashtag I use for my class, Introduction to Linguistics, okay? And the other one, NEO, is for neologisms. My students have to pay attention to new words that are appearing in the language, in Spanish or English, I don't mind what language it is, but words that have not been used before. They are new in the semester, and they have to explain how they came about, or they can be old words that are changing meaning, okay? And they have to, whoever finds a new word puts the hashtag in Twitter and explain where it came from. Introlapsus, that's also very interesting and my students get very involved in that. This morning I think I said that I put the fridge in the chicken instead of the chicken in the fridge. That's a lapsus linguae. My students have to pay attention to all of these lapsus linguae, and they make them very aware of phonological processes like metathesis or this word. It's very interesting to, and so we collect lots of examples of these introlapsus that they experience in their real lives, okay? And then we have intromedia. This is easy. It's any news in the newspapers, on the media about languages or linguistics, so they have to post it with this hashtag, no? Discrimination, so something I pay a lot of attention. We talk about sexism in language, gender discrimination, racial discrimination, etc. Whenever they find an example of this use of, in their real life, of use of language in this pejorative, discriminating way, they have to report it, okay, through this project. Prejudice is about these ideas that we all have, or society has about language, that according to linguists, and we might be wrong, are false, okay? So they have to note them. And then also, since my students are all second language learners, they have to identify errors that foreign students make when they speak Spanish, or when they themselves are trying to learn English or French or Italian, and try to explain the errors, okay? In a tweet or in the Facebook group. So we use, probably soon I will have to switch to Instagram because that's where students are going now. So I go where they are. I don't try to bring them where I am because that doesn't usually work, okay? That's one project. They don't have to devote time to this because it's not obligatory. If you don't find any of these examples, it's okay. But as a group, we find usually many examples, okay? Now this is obligatory because I wanted them every week to produce something. So we have 15 weeks in the semester, 9 of them, they have to write short essays. Similar to op-ed in a newspaper, I give them lots of topics. I'm increasing my topics year by year, and I also ask them to propose new topics so that they create new ones, so that I make sure that they find something interesting. And so for example, I'm giving you 2 I'm working on now. Chomsky, hero or villain. I don't know if you have heard of Tom Wolfe attack on Chomsky on the Kingdom of Speech. So according to Tom Wolfe, Chomsky is a villain. According to the Chomskyians, of course, he's a hero. I give my students an excerpt from Tom Wolfe's book and a speech, one of these Chomskyians defending Chomsky and how great he is, or how he has revolutionized linguistics, and my students have to write their own essay with their own opinion, okay? I know you are going to tell me, oh, first-year students cannot do that. Well, I cannot do that because I don't know if Chomsky is really a hero or a villain, but at least I can think about it and I can get information and I can write my own opinion as long as I find arguments to defend it, okay? And this is what I want my students to do. Or in the case of deaf children, the language of education of deaf children. Usually I give them the case, okay? Imagine, like the linguist in the movie we saw, I asked them, oh, imagine that a family that you know, they have had a deaf child, and they come to you, and they tell you, oh, the other families tell us not to use sign language because that's bad for the development of the doctors tell us this and that, no? So they have to come up with their own opinion on whether they think oralism, using oral language only in the education of deaf children, is better than using mostly sign language and also trying to teach them the oral language, okay, bilingualism. and they have to write their own essay. I always gave them some information, and I always encourage them to find other types of sources, and they have to write 9 of these, okay? All of these. Yeah?
How long are these essays?
It's open, it's very short, okay? Because they have to write, writing is a complicated process and they have to investigate about them. I usually assign them a couple of readings or maybe watching a video or something like that. So for example, the video I passed to you about the Sephardic Jews, Judeo-Español, the last of the Sephardic. There they have to write, I asked them to see this video, and using this video and the information from this video, write a short essay on why do languages disappear, because in that video you can see many of the causes that make language dead. So I try to tell them that for each of these essays they should devote at most 3 or 4 hours in research and writing, okay? Because they have to write a lot of them. And the thing is, I want them to write weekly, because they notice that week by week they improve a lot, okay? Just by the practice of writing. Then another activity that I always have is the other 6 weeks that they don't have essays, they always have to turn in some problems, no? In phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantic grammatics, and I try them to be quite creative. For example, in phonetic phonology, I ask them to hear Nahuatl, a language that they've never heard before, and try to do a phonetic transcription of that language. Then they realize how oral language is something very different from written language, okay? And then when you try to transcribe, and I tell them again, I don't want them to spend their whole lives on that. I give them a fragment and tell them, okay, use 1 hour of your time and try to transcribe as much as you can. And then write an essay on what you have found out about oral language doing this. Another essay that is very popular, because my students are from Hispanica, Philology Hispanica, and one of the prejudices they come with is that orthography, spelling, is the most important thing in language. And I try to convince them that orthography, spelling, and I have big arguments with them, big fights. And when I was not a flipped teacher, when I was in charge of the class, I never won these fights. And Anna, who just came, and Diego were students of mine many years ago in first year, and they could see that I never managed to convince my students. Now I'm more clever, I let them convince each other, and now I ask them for this problem, I tell them that the Royal Academy has finally decided that Gabriel García Márquez was right, that we need a reform of orthography, that we need an orthography that is entirely phonological, and that they have to create that orthography, based totally phonological. And then they have to transcribe their favorite poem of the Spanish language into that new orthography, the new spelling, and then they have to write an essay in the new orthography explaining when they are teachers of Spanish in a high school, which most of our students end up being teachers in high school, whether they would fail because of spelling and orthography. And now when they are writing, whether they would fail in a system that they have invented that is full of mistakes of the standard orthography, then they realize that orthography, that spelling, is just a convention and it's not really that important. I mean, it's important that people write with good spelling, but it's not the most important. There are many other linguistic skills and abilities that are much more important. And our society focuses too much in these superficial aspects of language.
Do they share it, the products they create or the essays they write and give them to you to get corrected or somehow? Do they share them? I mean, do they manage, because they're fantastic, no? The way they get involved and they create something. Do they manage to see what the others have done through?
Yeah, I let them do that voluntarily in the Facebook group. Whoever wants to share, some do it, but then we always, about orthography, spelling, because it's one of my topics, and I'm sure they remember about this, we always have one of the debates in class about there we have SPAC. Before I got very involved, now I let them fight each other because they convince each other better than I do. So the thing is, I mean, I have too many students and I cannot oversee all the work, but I tell them, oh, if you share in Facebook, I can give you comments and I can be, and then at the end, you will see later, I evaluate them through portfolio. And in the portfolio they choose what they want to show to me and why, and they have to reflect about it. And then it's when I see the final product and when I can give them some feedback. That's one of my main problems. If I have, previous years I had 150 students, so the LM system is good for this, because they have to turn in there, so I can check that they have done all the work, and I can sort of, since I don't spend now time lecturing, I can go see what they are doing, but that's one of my weaknesses. I cannot give them as much feedback as I would like, but each other, I want to do the peer evaluation, that they can evaluate and see the others, but it's not working very well with the essays because I don't have an automatic way of doing it. But it's working very well in the presentation, when the groups present, the other people are through rubrics, they are evaluating the work of the student. Another one thing a new one that I introduced last semester, the pragmatics, I gave them the option of creating like a joke, but created by themselves, that use linguistic, like a pun, a double meaning of a word, or something like that. And they were quite creative, and they didn't realize the importance of pragmatics, for the understanding of humor. So I try to be quite creative in the kind of assignment that I give them. And these are basic, these are all obligatory, okay? They have to do 6, and they have to do the 6 of them, and we spend a lot of time in class making sure that they all know how to do the basic distributional analysis problems, and finding out the phonemes of a language, the morphemes of a languages, etc. Then, this is probably the one where they learn the most, is they all work in one project that they choose, okay? In groups of 2 to 5, 4 usually is the normal. They choose the project, they choose who they want to work with. If I have enough foreign students, in first year I don't usually have that, but in third year and fourth year, I make them do tandem. I force them to be Spanish and foreigners. Because it's funny, I don't know if it happens here, but in Spain, especially Hispanic philology students, they have many Erasmus students in there sitting with them, but usually they don't collaborate. And I make them collaborate, because they don't collaborate because they are just listening to the teachers teach, and they are taking notes, and they don't have time to collaborate. But I make them collaborate. And last year I did it in my applied linguistics class, third year, and it worked wonderfully. In first year it's more difficult because I don't have so many foreign students, but whenever I can, I always put foreign students with Spanish students. That's the only constraint I put in the group formation. And I'm going to give you examples of some of these projects. My favorite are these two. Is action research or service learning projects. I think this is where we should all be going. We should be doing things that do not stay here in the classroom, but that have an effect in society. Okay? So I have 2 projects. And this one is not so popular. I don't get so many students involved in this project. This one about sign language, Spanish sign language, this is very popular. I always get like 15 or 20 of the first year students who get involved in this project. What is this project about? I'm going to describe this, because if not I'm going to run out of time. Basically the 2 are revitalization language. The objective is for the students to learn about the language, the culture, okay? And then try to do something about it, because this Ndapiaku is Tunsavi is the mistaken language of Mexico, which, as you all know, all languages of Mexico, even the large one, mistaken language, has like 400,000 speakers, but they are all bilingual, and the language has very low prestige, and so it's being abandoned. So there is a problem, a serious problem for the continuation of these languages. And so I want my students to become involved in learning about the language, learning about the culture, and try to do something through the social media, okay? So that has an effect out of the classroom. Now, Sign Language Project is something very similar. Sign languages are minoritized languages everywhere, even in an advanced, developed country like Iceland. And so I want my students to learn about the language, learn about the deaf community, learn about all the situations and the richness that it is to have such a language. And I ask them Before, I've been doing this project for 15, 16 years, before even I was, I'm sure you remember that always, but before the students had to work on it and present something to the class, and it all stayed in the class. Nowadays, what I ask them to do is to go out of the university, go to their schools, to their towns, and give a talk about what they have learned, okay? Or we have organized already 3 days of awareness of the sign language in our university. And I can show you, we have a Facebook group for this. I have lots of Facebook groups now with my students. Oh, why is it entering automatically? But why is it my password cannot be there? What is there? Okay, here you have what we share, and you have, for example, one video so that you get an idea. No? This was last May when we did this, and so this is one of the first year students talking about what he had learned in front of many deaf people of the community who came, and also deaf and blind people. So you will see now lots of interpreters there, interpreting what my student is saying, and so we organize like a few hours of several workshops all around the university building, which is very large, where people could experience what it meant to be deaf and blind, where people could learn some basic sign language. So it's worked very well. And in Dapiaki Tunsavi, we also do many things, but I don't have time to do it now. Let's go back to my presentation, because we do many other things. Now how do I go back to the presentation?
Present a view.
Okay, here. Okay. Okay. Other projects. I'm also involved with some Chinese teachers who come to my school to teach Chinese. I have my students take the Chinese class, and they learn Chinese, and they have to apply what they learn in linguistics. Like Chinese is a tonal language, it's an analytical language, and many things from Chinese. Or they have to create an artificial language, and some people have decided to create artificial languages and work. Others can be the journalists and historians of the class. Their role is, like Jat is doing now, record everything that happens in the class, share it in the social media, go to the other projects and see what they are doing, and at the end create some kind of history of what is going on, no, in the class. And we have lots of recordings, and when they create them, if they want to share it, they share it. When I create them, I ask them for permission to share them, etc. But I usually share them in the Facebook groups that are private, so that they only can see it, and they find it very interesting to watch the classes and watch the discussions and watch, and that's interesting because they learn through the videos. Or they can choose a topic that we don't have time to deal in class, because like neurolinguistic, forensic linguistic, language contact, any topic, whatever they're interested in, they work on that topic the whole semester, and they try to teach the other students what they have learned, okay? Or they can create their own projects. Some students have surprised me with projects about language and music and very, very interesting things. And those are really, really nice. So what do we devote class time to now that we don't have to lecture? We don't have to worry about the content, because I assign them readings, or they learn the content in a different way, okay? Through this, we have discussions, weekly debates. Remember, I already had that with you. But before, I was in charge of the debates, and I never managed to convince any of my students of anything. I imagine you remember the Catalan debate, no? And I didn't manage. I had a fight with the class because Seville, we have lots of prejudice about being a monolingual community. We don't appreciate the bilinguals, no? But I always fight with my students, but I never managed to convince them. Now I act differently. I let them lead the discussions. I always invite some students from Catalonia who is living, working, studying in the University of Sevilla, and I let them fight among themselves, and they manage to convince. Then we spend a lot of time to the problems and to make sure that they know. Some classes, I do seminar-type classes, more similar to what we have at the master levels. They read something, but they lead the class. I don't lead any of these classes, okay? And I have conceptual workshops. This is very interesting. This is there is a book in the United States, Don Finkel. Since I read him, he's one of my favorites. He's How to Teach with the Mouth Shut. So a whole book on how to be in the class as a teacher, but don't say anything, okay? And one of his ideas was these conceptual workshops. You give your students some written instruction with some problems that together lead them step by step to, in small groups, learn about a particular topic that you want them to learn. And he has a very interesting conceptual workshop on how to convince them of the concept of aporia in the Greek dialogues of Plato, how Socrates used this aporia as a device through dialectics, convince the other person through this cognitive dissonance, but there was a moment that the other person said, oh, if I follow this line of argumentation, I reach an absurd conclusion, so I'm wrong, I have to change, this moment. And he has one, I've used it for one topic I presented here several years ago, which I presented always to my students, which is verb of movements in Romance languages versus Germanic languages. I always presented it to my students, what I knew, my ideas, okay? Now what I do, I created a conceptual workshop where I give them data, and I ask them to, through the data, try to reach the conclusions, okay? And it works much better, because now they don't forget about it, okay? And now we work in class, although most of the projects they have done out of class, but I think I'm going to devote more time in class to divide them in groups, to give them time to work on the projects in class, because if this way I can control what they are doing, I can see what they are doing, and also answering student questions and all of that. Now, how do I use new technologies? Because in order to have ubiquitous and expanded learning, they are learning all the time because they are in Facebook all the time working on these projects, and the use of the social networks, the video recordings are very useful. The Kahoot and Socrates, I don't know if you've ever now it's very easy to design, because the problem with this methodology is how do you make the student read material or do come to class prepared. If you use gamification like Kahoot, you can motivate them because they have to come to compete against other students in answering questions, and first year students really love this. And also the use of email, trying to send them email after email after email. I know I'm too much, but I have to ask them many times in order to get them to do the things I want to, okay? And they complain about that, so many emails. I'm all day writing emails, but okay. Now important, I'm convinced before, evaluation for me was just giving a grade at the end of the course, I gave an exam, I graded the exam, I gave the grade. And now I try to separate that summative evaluation, that giving the grade, from the formative evaluation, that now I have time to this formative evaluation because in class I'm all the time observing, seeing what they're doing, okay? So now I give a student, because I have so many students, I give them 3 ways of evaluation. A continuous evaluation of their work, which requires class attendance, participating in class and in the projects, turning all these 9 essays and all the 5 problem sets, and writing the portfolio, which includes a class diary. This is the most important. When I ask them to write a class diary, they always say, oh, no, I don't want to do that, that's not useful for anything. I mean, the class diary is every day when they go home, they have to answer 3 questions. What have I learned today? How did I learn it? And what questions did it raise on me? And that, only thinking about that, writing just a short paragraph, makes they realize that through this reflection, because this is one of the abilities we were talking earlier, they learn a lot. And then the other choice is final exam. If they want to, if they cannot do all of this because they don't have time, they work or whatever, they can always have the choice. Or some people start with this, but then they cannot come to class regularly, and then I give them the choice of doing a combination of the 2, continuous evaluation plus the exam, so that the exam is not the whole,
What do they usually, or what do they most?
Here, this 90% of the students
so
do
they,
this.
they would just skip the final exam.
They skip the final exam. They don't like exams. And Yesterday I was in El País. If you want, I can send you Sugata Mitra talking about exams. And if you think about it, he's right. Exams are just something that create anxiety in the students. It's not a good way of evaluating students because what are you testing in exam? Just usually memory. No? Well, there are other type of exams, no? But usually it's memory. And so really, they prefer this. I mean, this is the process most of my students go. Or they see me and say, oh, continuous evaluation, oh, this is an easy class, I'm going to pass very easily, no problem. But then they realize that it involves a lot of work and that they learn more this way. No? 1 year I made the mistake of requiring both this and this. And that created a dissonance because they all were worried about this and didn't care about this, okay? And so I realized that it's better to give them the choice. If you do all of this, and you do it with good quality, I'm going to look at the final portfolio and I'm going to see if you have done really all the work, and I'm observing you all the semester. They usually do enough work so that they can pass the subject, okay? But if they prefer to do this or this, I give them that choice, and this is key. So the evaluation is probably the most important, but you have to change your evaluation system if you want to become an innovative professor, no, in a sense. Now, so what do I use to evaluate? So the portfolio has 2 sections: a linguistic biography, where the students introduce their life and but linguistically, no, and also their beliefs about teaching and learning, and what kind of teacher they want to be. Now, the second part is evidence of the work that they have done during the semester, some of the essays, some the collaborative work, etc. Reflection, this is very important. The third part is to reflect, and here they have to include the class diary. I like to read all the class diaries that they present. And then they evaluate at the final part of the portfolio. They have to self-evaluate. Okay, that's very important. Know yourself, evaluate yourself. Co-evaluate the other team members who have worked with you in the project, and also they have to evaluate me and the class. Okay. The thing is, since this is going to give them the grade, suppose you cannot trust them what they say. In general, they are very satisfied. And in the portfolio, they all say, oh, this method, they all say the same, no? But, okay, what I usually do also, and this is what I did in first year, in July 15th, well, one of the problems of this method is that you spend a lot of time reading portfolios, more time than you would spend reading exams. But reading portfolios is much more interesting because you learn a lot more than reading exams, okay? That's the good point. So I gave them the grade after July 15th, and I asked them to write an anonymous questionnaire after I gave them the grades, okay? I only managed to get 43 out. This year I had like 90 portfolios, I think, and I got 43 responses, which July 15th, when they are in holidays, etc., it's good that I got. And I don't know if we have time because I'm talking too much, because I want to. Oh, no, I don't have time. Well, I can send you basically, I asked them about all these all the different things, and they are quite satisfied. Okay, and this is after I've given them the grades. Then, oh, sorry. I have a couple of quotes from one student. She's an Erasmus student, saying all these things that I have been describing and how they worked for her. And I'm not going to spend time on this because I already talked too much. So let's read just this one. In conclusion, I really enjoyed the linguistics class in Sevilla taught by Juan Pablo. I think she was Scottish from Scotland. I feel that through a different method of teaching, I could learn far more and was extremely interested in the class throughout the course of the semester. The different essays, tasks, and the project allowed us to extend our knowledge of various branches of linguistics and also learn about current debates which are taking place around the globe. I enjoyed learning about the death of languages and the argument regarding the best way of teaching the deaf population. I also learned that there are differences between Spanish and English, but also similarity in the different linguistic branches. I really commend Juan Pablo's work, and as I feel his enthusiasm and drive allow the class to to feel at ease to participate and enjoy the class, which makes learning far easier. So this is a good summary of what most of the students, there are some people who probably hate me because I make them work too much, but my conclusion is that it involves a lot of more work than the more traditional approach, but it is much more enriching for both teachers and students. For the first time in my teaching career, I get the feeling that I am changing my students and helping them to get rid of some linguistic prejudice. And for the first time, I have the conviction that I am helping them to learn autonomously and to think critically. So I create a learning environment where I promote these higher order skills that we were talking at the beginning. And I think that's it. Okay.